Speaking of good times, a new segment that we're entering into the ring here is one thing we want to do is incorporate our website articles more into the shows. And so we're introducing Boss Rush Banter of the Week. If you want to read our Boss Rush Banters, you can go to bossrush.net. Under the features tab, you can find our Boss Rush Banters as well as our other features. This Boss Rush Banter comes from Josh Martinez, and it's titled, "More Gaming Franchises Should Adopt the Stories Approach." And I thought this was interesting because I'm not a Monster Hunter person, but I really liked what I played of Monster Hunter Stories 2, to the point where, like, now that you guys are playing it, I actually want to go back and play it at some point because I really liked it. And Monster Hunter Stories is out now, right? It came out, 2 weeks ago? The remaster of the first one?
2 or 3 weeks ago. A double pack came out. Yeah.
And so we don't need to spend a lot of time on the banter, but I did think this was really interesting to discuss. Laurent, I'm gonna go your way first since you are the Monster Hunter guy.
Okay.
And you probably have the biggest relationship and the biggest conversation piece
with the franchise.
Yeah, between, like, here's the real Monster Hunter, quote unquote, and here's the the RPG over here.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, like I actually like this banner, and I like the approach to how he did this. The one thing that Monster Hunter Stories does that is completely different from the actual the main Monster Hunter franchise is the fact that this is a true RPG. You know, it's got it's true in every sense of the word. Like, it's turn-based combat. It's got a rock paper scissors approach, which that's kind of quirky for an RPG game. But if you played any of the damn Pokemon games from back in the day, you should be familiar with this. In all honesty, but also Stories does one thing that the Monster Hunter proper series took a while to do, and that was actually have an actual fleshed out story that you can follow front to end, because they didn't start doing the story approach honestly until probably Monster Hunter Tri, if we're being honest, but actually they didn't take it serious. I didn't think they took seriously Monster Hunter 4 came out. That's when you had a front to back storyline for that was contained in that one game. But more gaming franchises. I agree with it. More gaming franchises should adopt the stories approach because, and not so much the stories approach like what they did. For example, Elden Ring is steeped in lore, but just imagine if it was just a senseless action game or platformer game in the Elden Ring universe, for example, or if what's another one? Let's say if we take elements from Destiny and turn that into an RPG, for example. I'm not sure if Corey would play it per se, but I think Corey would pay enough attention to it to look at it and check it out.
That's something we've actually talked about quite a bit. Is what would a traditional first person shooter look like with the kind of the NPCs of Destiny look like? What would the one game that was actually pitched was an XCOM style game with Destiny characters. Which would be super interesting. But also, yes, an RPG, like a turn-based RPG or something of that nature would also be really interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
I didn't interrupt you.
No. I was actually trying to get talking points that would get everybody engaged, But yeah, here's one excerpt from the banter that I want to do. He says while this approach may not hit for everyone, it does provide a great way to anyone to try a new franchise, especially if the base game isn't their cup of tea. Now, I want to take it a little bit further with that because what I'll say here is that stuff like this is actually a good power play and a marketing play for companies like Capcom, for example, because for the longest time, Monster Hunter had like this either had this high level of entry that people didn't want to like invest in, or it was just way too out there and quirky for them to even want to understand and take time to play and stuff like that. Monster Hunter Stories comes along, and if you play the game, I loved the first one when it came out on the Nintendo DS. Like I loved it, and actually it was the 3DS game. My bad. When it came out, the first game came out on 3DS, and I loved it. Like I didn't know I was going to love it until like I played it. I knew I was going to play it, but I didn't know I was going to love it. And by the time I beat the game, like there was so much in the game that I was so familiar with Monster Hunter that I knew that anybody who was brand new to the franchise, they would see this stuff and they would get interested at least to look up the actual monsters and stuff like that, because like Monster Hunter's biggest draw is the monsters itself and stuff like that. So like it was a power play for Capcom. They kind of knew like if people enjoyed that game enough, they may turn around and look at the main series. And yeah, so I feel like that's the approach, like, like a lot of companies should go for. But we also see it in reverse, because like Pokemon has like evolved into like different games from what Pokemon was when it first came out. Because Pokemon was a very kid friendly RPG, like back in the days, and when it first came out on the Game Boy. Stuff like that. Like look what we have now. We have Arceus and all these other games. They're basically offshoots, but also get people involved into it. I guarantee you, Pokemon Snap probably got new people involved into playing the traditional Pokemon games and stuff like that. I'm trying to think of some other examples that where like a spinoff like got people to get into the main franchise, but I can't really think of anything that blatant. So yeah. So there it is. Yeah, I think more companies should do this approach, and they should take more risk. We've been saying that for a while here in the Boss Rush podcast. Like companies need to take a little bit more risk and stop playing it safe, because playing it safe is definitely not going to playing safe is not going to get you like the numbers and the money you want. Because like now we know for sure like remakes and remasters aren't going to guarantee you like money. Which is wild, because like I don't know why they're not thinking about doing a Dead Space 2.
I would
That's
oh, sorry, Laron, I didn't
I
know.
was gonna say that's for another conversation that he had. That was I was ending it.
I think of things like Warriors games, like Fire Emblem Warriors or
Yeah,
Hyrule Warriors or Dragon
that is
Quest
a good
Warriors.
example. I don't know why I didn't think of that.
I think of stuff like that, to where I mean, Fire Emblem is a really, I would argue Fire Emblem is actually kind of tough to get into. Unless you're like really into RPGs or
If
strategy games.
if you missed the bus when the Fire Emblem games came on the Game Boy Advance, you are gonna have a hard time, because
Yeah.
like only the hardcore people played Fire Emblem before it came to Game Boy Advance.
Yeah, it was. I mean I would even argue those Game Boy Advance games are tough. I would argue that Three Houses is probably the easiest one to get into, because it's
That's
all
interesting, considering
I would
how
jump,
rich that game is.
I'd jump even sooner and say the game made it more accessible to everyone when Awakening came out for the DS. That
right,
was when they got rid of the permadeath.
right. I meant in terms of just like Persona started getting popular, and
Mm-hmm.
Three Houses has a lot of Persona qualities in it, and it kind of masqueraded as a different game than a strategy RPG, because it had a lot of that in it. And I know that the 3DS games and the DS games have that a little bit, but you're right. Awakening was a very easy jumping on point for people. I think spinoffs really, I guess it depends on what kind of franchise you're looking at, because like Gears Tactics, right, is a tactical spinoff. I would argue that the mainline games are easier to get into than the spin-off games in that respect.
Well, I think what who wrote this again? This was
Josh
Josh. Yeah.
Josh.
Coming up with a story or the story games as in a more easier approachable version of the game, whereas the stories had an RPG turn based. It was not as like demanding or difficult as the original series. So I definitely agree with what you said about the warrior style version of Fire Emblem, I think, was definitely an easier approach
Hmm.
for being a side thing. I think when I think of games that maybe could use the story treatment, one that I would love to see would be maybe a traditional RPG set in the Dark Souls world.
Mm.
So that the difficulty of the melee combat isn't there, but it's be more in the lines of like a story or a turn-based RPG.
Hmm.
That way people can like get into the lore of the story.
Hmm.
Another one I thought of, maybe Doom could get an RPG treatment. Hell, you got yourself a silent protagonist there.
There is. It's on iPhone. Doom RPG.
Really?
Yeah.
What kind of RPG is it?
I don't know. I just know there's a game called Doom RPG and it's on phones.
But yeah, because Doom now, the universe has expanded to worlds, the hell,
Hmm.
Earth, like there's all different places now that you can explore. You have all sorts of environments and different creatures and a vast lore that you can build into
Hmm.
with that one.
Yeah. I mean, another game that's doing it now too is Horizon. Look at it's going like the Lego game, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mhm.
probably a different approach that you could look at too. Of like, oh well, this kind of series that's aimed more towards an older audience. How do we get kids into these PlayStation IP without having them watching people get murdered all the time and like, oh well, Legos, everybody likes Legos, so let's throw this world into that. And I'm so excited for Lego Horizon, um, mostly because it's like retelling the first game in the Lego form, but also, you know, I think my kids will get into it. My daughter really likes like I have the Aloy statue from the first game, the first collector's edition, and my daughter like points at it all the time and like really likes it. And I thought, well, this could be a way for her to like get into something like that at some point, because it's kid friendly. There's a lot of comedy. Obviously, there's a lot of costumes and weird stuff going on in Lego games. And it's a franchise that, has, that female character that she could probably look up to at some point. And if she gets into games, she could point at Horizon as like, oh, that's a series that I can, relate to or something, So,
Mhm.
yeah.
What about you, Steph? Anything you can think of that could use the treatment?
Not particularly, but probably because 'cause I'm brain dead. And also I'm not really a big fan of uh Warriors type spin-offs, but I was kind of thinking, other type of spin-offs we could continue to do for the Legend of Zelda franchise, but I feel like that's a cop-out answer.
Well, no. Like, if honest, I would love to hear your input on like, what do you think? Like, Legend of Zelda hasn't done that might help bring more people into it.
Oh goodness. It's almost kind of like we could do over Triforce Heroes and not be a terrible game. Not a remake of it. I'm just saying, like, go in that direction where it can be a little silly and lighthearted, but just not bad. You know what I'm saying?
Maybe let AI control the other two characters.
Maybe, yeah. So I don't know. Even if The Legend of Zelda was like they made a farming sim spin-off.
Rebuild Hyrule.
That'd be cool.
Like,
Exactly, right?
yeah, uh, not a survival game, but like a
Like
sim builder.
a sim builder or
Uh,
management. Yeah, build your
yeah,
own
Stardew
Hyrule.
Valley, but in a Zelda form where you're rebuilding Hyrule.
That'd be cool.
Ah, there you go. So I think that'd be great because there's a huge mass of people that love sim, especially farming sim type things. So there's
Mhm.
that. And not that The Legend of Zelda is too mature anyway, because it's really not. I mean, some themes can be, but just all the more to get more fans in, especially since, Nintendo's doubling down with a movie. Let's just all put that together.
Hmm. Side tangent. It wouldn't get people into Zelda. It'd probably turn a lot of people off. But I always thought a Souls game set in Hyrule where you played as Ganon would be awesome.
Mhm.
Okay.
I
I
think
see
Are we
where you're
talking?
going here.
Are we talking at least Daddy Dwarf? Oh, even better, Daddy Dwarf. But when he dies, he goes into withered Daddy Dwarf or dehydrated Daddy Dwarf.
Dehydrated. Yeah. Yes.
He gets
Yes.
hollowed.
I'm sure. I just think that would be so cool of like you're actually playing the rise of Ganon or Ganondorf through this, and it's telling the story of his rise through the ranks of like not just the Gerudo but just like taking over all of Hyrule.
Mm.
And I just thought I have always thought that would be a cool idea. And I think Zelda is the perfect IP to put it into the Souls genre. Just because there's already so many different big bosses and different styles of bosses, and you have to attack them in different ways. And I don't know. I always thought that would be really cool.
No, I like the idea.
Mhm.
Set it in Twilight Princess. Yes. Anybody else have anything else they want to say about this banter? I thought it was really cool. I like the idea of spin-off games and franchises that we like in different genres. So